She was standing on my porch in the rain, 18 years old, hair soaked through, eyes red from crying, or maybe from the cold, I couldn't tell which. And in her hands, pressed against her chest like it was something fragile, was a letter, not a text, not a voicemail, a letter. Handwritten, sealed with tape because she didn't have an envelope, she told me later. She'd written it 3 times and thrown away the first 2. I hadn't seen Lily in 3 years. 3 years, 2 months, and if I'm being precise about it, 11 days. I know that because I counted. Not obsessively, not at first. But somewhere around month 4, when the silence had settled into something permanent and I realized I wasn't going to wake up one morning and find it fixed, I started keeping track. Not on a calendar, just in my chest, the way you keep track of things that cost you something. I stood at that door for what felt like a long time before I moved. She said, "Grandma Ruth," and her voice broke right down the middle of my name. I pulled her inside. I didn't ask questions. I didn't say anything about the 3 years or why she was there or where her mother was. I just brought her into the kitchen, wrapped a dish towel around her wet hair the way I used to when she was small, put the kettle on, and sat across from her while she cried. The letter stayed on the table between us, unopened, while I waited for her to be ready. That's the part people don't understand when I tell this story. They want to know what I did wrong. They want to know what her mother accused me of. They want to know if I fought it, if I hired a lawyer, if I showed up anyway and pounded on the door and demanded my rights as a grandmother. I didn't do any of those things. And that, it turns out, was the only thing that saved us. Let me go back to the beginning. My son Daniel was 34 when he married Vanessa. I'll be honest, I had reservations, not about Vanessa personally, not at first, but Daniel had always been the kind of man who needed to be needed. Generous to a fault, easily led, the sort of person who would give you the last $20 in his wallet and then feel guilty that he didn't have more to offer. I loved him fiercely. I also worried about him constantly. Vanessa was beautiful and sharp and absolutely certain about everything. She had opinions about how things should be done, how a home should be run, how money should be managed, how family relationships should function, and those opinions were delivered not as suggestions, but as settled facts. In the beginning, I mistook that certainty for confidence. I thought it was good for Daniel. I thought maybe she'd provide the kind of steadiness he'd never quite found in himself. What I didn't realize, not for a long time, was that her certainty left no room for anyone else's version of things. Their wedding was lovely. The first 2 years were fine, on the surface. Lily was born in year 3, and everything changed, the way it always does when a baby comes. Priorities shift. Old relationships get renegotiated. I understood that. I tried to give them space. But Vanessa had very specific ideas about grandparenting. I was allowed to visit on scheduled days. I was not to arrive unannounced. I was not to bring gifts without prior approval. I was not to feed Lily certain foods, use certain words, or tell certain kinds of stories specifically, any story that involved Daniel's childhood, because Vanessa felt that my memories of Daniel were, and I'm quoting her here, selectively edited to position you as the hero. I remember sitting in my car after she said that, just sitting there in their driveway, trying to understand what I had done to make her feel that way. I hadn't done anything. That was the thing. I had followed every rule, respected every boundary, bitten my tongue so many times I'd lost count. But Vanessa had decided, early and irrevocably, that I was a problem. And once she'd decided that, every ordinary grandparent thing I did became evidence of it. I brought Lily a stuffed rabbit for her second birthday, one I'd had since Daniel was small, a family heirloom of sorts, nothing grand, just a soft gray rabbit with a missing eye that Daniel had loved to pieces. Vanessa thanked me politely in front of everyone and then pulled Daniel aside and told him it was inappropriate to give a child a toy with missing parts. She threw it away. I found out months later when Lily asked where the rabbit went and I had to pretend I didn't know. That was the first time I understood that something was genuinely wrong. Not difficult, not complicated. Wrong, but I said nothing. Because Lily was 2, and she needed peace in her home more than I needed to be right. The breaking point came when Lily was 15. She had been struggling in school, not academically, but socially. There was a group of girls who had turned on her, the way girls sometimes do at that age, that particular brand of cruelty that leaves no visible marks. She had started spending more time at my house on her permitted Thursday afternoons, and we had fallen into a habit of talking. Really talking. About her friends, about feeling left out, about what it means to be loyal to people who aren't loyal to you in return. I told her about a time in my own life, when I was 17, when my closest friend had chosen a boy over me in a way that felt like the end of the world. I told her how I'd handled it not well, at first. I'd been angry, and then I'd been cold, and then I'd been sad. And then one morning I'd woken up and just decided to let it go, not for her sake, for mine. Lily listened to that story very carefully. She asked good questions. And then she went home and, because she was 15 and still learning what was safe to share and with whom, she told her mother about our conversation. Vanessa called me that night. She told me I had overstepped, that I had inserted myself into a parenting situation, that by sharing a personal story with Lily I had undermined Vanessa's authority as a mother and made Lily feel that she could come to me with problems instead of coming to her parents. I tried to explain. I said I hadn't been undermining anyone, I'd simply been listening to my granddaughter. Vanessa said, and I remember this word for word, "That's exactly the problem, Ruth. You listen to her in a way that makes her trust you more than she trusts us. And I won't allow that." I was so stunned I didn't respond. She took my silence as defiance. 3 days later, Daniel called. He sounded exhausted and sad and like a man reading from a script he hadn't written. He told me that he and Vanessa had decided it would be best if I took a break from seeing Lily. He said it wasn't permanent. He said they just needed some space while things settled down. I asked him what things. He couldn't answer that. I said, "Daniel, I am your mother. I have never done anything to harm your daughter. I have followed every rule, respected every request, shown up when I was wanted, and stayed away when I wasn't. And I'm being told to take a break from my granddaughter because I listened to her when she was hurting." He said, "I know, Mom, I know." And then he said he was sorry and hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, because I think people assume it was rage. It wasn't. Not at first. What I felt was grief. Pure, deep, disorienting grief. The kind that lives in your body, not just your mind. The kind that makes you not know what to do with your hands. I grieved for 3 days. I barely ate. I didn't sleep. I called my sister in Phoenix and cried for 2 hours, and she said all the right things, and none of them helped. And then, on the 4th morning, something settled. I'd been praying I'm a woman of faith, not loudly but consistently, and I remember sitting in my kitchen very early, the light still gray, with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. And I felt something I can only describe as a kind of clarity. I thought, Lily is 15. In 3 years, she will be 18, and at 18, she will make her own choices. What do I want her to know when that day comes? What do I want her to think of me? I did not want her to grow up remembering a grandmother who fought with her mother, who made every family gathering tense, who sued for visitation rights and turned her childhood into a legal battleground, who showed up at the school or knocked on the door or demanded access in ways that put Lily in the middle of something she never should have been in. I wanted her to remember a woman who loved her quietly and consistently and without condition, even when it cost me. So I let go. I sent Lily one letter through Daniel telling her that I loved her and that I would always be here. I told her she didn't need to write back, that I wasn't going anywhere, and that when she was ready, if she was ever ready, my door would be open. I gave her my address as if she didn't already know it, because I wanted her to have it in her own handwriting so she could find it herself someday. I asked Daniel to make sure she received it. He told me later that Vanessa had screened it first, that she'd read it looking for evidence of manipulation, that she'd read it 3 times and couldn't find any, and so she'd handed it to Lily without comment. Lily kept that letter in her desk drawer for 3 years. I know this now, I didn't know it then. What I knew then was silence. 3 years of it. I won't pretend it was peaceful. There were nights when I sat in the chair where Lily used to curl up and read while I cooked dinner, and the absence of her was almost physical. There were Christmases that were very hard. Her 16th birthday was particularly brutal. I baked the lemon cake she loved, the one with the lavender frosting that she declared her favorite at age 10. And I sat at my kitchen table alone and ate 1 piece and put the rest in the freezer and cried more than I expected to. I had good days too. I kept busy. I volunteered. I traveled once to Scotland to see the country my grandmother had come from. I started a small garden in the backyard and became, improbably, genuinely good at growing tomatoes. I did not contact Vanessa. I did not contact Daniel, except for the ordinary communications of a family, a birthday card here, a check-in call there. I was polite and warm, and I never, not once, mentioned Lily's name in a way that could be used against me. I was playing a long game. I just didn't know if I'd win it. Here's what was happening in their house during those 3 years. I didn't know any of this at the time. I've learned it in pieces since, some from Lily, some from Daniel, some from things I've put together myself. In the year after I was banned, Lily had been angry. Not at me, she hadn't fully understood why I was gone. She'd been angry in the diffuse, untargeted way of teenagers, turning it inward and then outward and then nowhere. Her grades slipped. She quit the volleyball team she'd been playing on since she was 10. She spent a lot of time in her room. Vanessa's interpretation was that Lily was struggling because she'd been too close to me, that I'd been a destabilizing influence, that the distance was necessary and healing. Daniel, from what I understand, had doubts, but he didn't voice them. In the second year, Lily found a journal. Not mine, her grandmother on Vanessa's side, a woman named Patty, who had passed away when Lily was small. Vanessa had kept boxes of Patty's things in the attic, and Lily had gone looking for something else and stumbled on the journal. She'd read it over several weeks, in secret, the way teenagers read things they know they're not supposed to have. Patty's journal was mostly ordinary, recipes, observations about weather, small complaints about small things, but scattered throughout were entries about Vanessa as a girl, and those entries were honest in the way that private journals are honest, and what they revealed was a pattern. Vanessa had always cut people off, friends who disappointed her, relatives who got too close. A sister she hadn't spoken to in 20 years over a slight so small that Patty had written, "I still don't understand what happened." Vanessa just decided, and that was that. She's always done this. I hope she learns to stop before she loses everyone. Lily read that entry 3 times. She didn't say anything to her parents, but something shifted in her understanding of what had happened to us. In the 3rd year, Lily turned 17, and Vanessa made an error of a different kind. There was a boy. His name was Marcus, and Lily had been seeing him for 4 months, which was a long time for a 17-year-old, and she was serious about him in the way of first love, earnest and absolute. She brought him home for dinner once. And Vanessa took a disliking to him for reasons that were never fully articulated, something about his family, something about his ambitions, something about the way he looked at Lily that Vanessa described as lacking in respect, though everyone else at the table had seen nothing of the sort. 2 weeks later, Vanessa told Lily she couldn't see Marcus anymore. Lily was 17, not 15. She was closer to 18 than 14. She looked at her mother and said, for the first time in her life, no. The argument that followed was enormous. Doors were slammed. Things were said that couldn't be unsaid. Daniel tried to mediate and failed, which had become by then something of a specialty of his. In the aftermath, Lily went to her room and opened her desk drawer and looked at my letter. She told me later that she'd read it so many times over 3 years that the paper was soft at the folds. She knew every word. She said she'd started reading it again when things were hard, not because it said anything particularly profound, but because it was evidence. Evidence that someone who loved her had chosen, deliberately and at personal cost, not to fight, not to make things harder, not to put her in the middle. She said, "You didn't make me choose, Grandma. Everyone else did. You were the only one who didn't." I have replayed that sentence many times. The week before her 18th birthday, Lily made a decision. She didn't tell her parents. She didn't ask permission. She just sat down and wrote a letter, threw it away, wrote another one, threw that away, and then wrote a third one on her birthday morning while the house was still quiet, folded it, wrapped it in tape, and got in her car. She drove to my house in the rain, and here I was, in my kitchen with a dish towel around her wet hair, watching her wrap her hands around a mug of tea and breathe. She pushed the letter across the table to me. I opened it slowly. It said, "Grandma, I know what happened. I know my mother's version, and I know it isn't the whole truth. I found Grandma Patty's journal. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I'm not ready to fix everything yet, but I want to know you again. If that's okay. I've missed you every day. I've missed the lemon cake. I've missed the way you listen. I've missed having someone who isn't asking me to be anything other than what I am. I'm sorry it took me this long. I love you." Lily, I set the letter down. I looked at her across the table, this young woman who had been 4 years old the first time she fell asleep on my couch, who had asked me at age 7 whether clouds had feelings, who had sat in my kitchen at 15 and heard a story about loyalty and taken it home inside her heart even when she didn't know yet what to do with it. I said, "There's nothing to be sorry for." She said, "There's a lot to explain." I said, "I know, we have time." And then I got up and took the lemon cake out of the freezer, not the same one. I had made a fresh one 2 days before her birthday, because some part of me had been hoping, and I put it on the table between us, and we started talking. We talked for 4 hours that first day, not about Vanessa, not about the 3 years, not directly, not yet, about everything else. About Marcus, whom she was still seeing despite her mother's objections, about the college she'd applied to in Vermont, which Vanessa had argued against and which Lily had chosen anyway, about the journal she'd found and what it had taught her, and the long, quiet process of understanding a parent as a person rather than simply a role. She said something that has stayed with me. She said, "I used to think my mom was trying to protect me from you. Now I think she was trying to protect herself. I'm not sure from what, but I don't think it was ever really about you." That kind of clarity, at 18. I thought about who she'd had to become to arrive at it, and my heart broke and swelled at the same time. Before she left, she asked me what had happened from my side. What had I felt? What had I done during those 3 years? I told her most of it. The grief, the clarity, the long game, the tomatoes. I told her about Scotland and about the lemon cake I'd frozen and eaten alone. I told her about the chair where she used to curl up to read and how I'd sometimes sit in it just because it still felt like her somehow. She cried again when I said that, quietly, into her tea. I told her one more thing. I said, "I never stopped being your grandmother. Not for a single day. You were always mine. I just had to wait until you were old enough to come find me yourself. And you did." She said, "I almost didn't. I almost talked myself out of it 100 times. I said, "What made you come?" She thought about it for a moment. She said, "The letter. You said my door will always be open." I needed to find out if that was still true. It was true. It had always been true. I need to tell you what happened after, because this story doesn't end at my kitchen table. Lily went to Vermont in the fall. She and Marcus are still together. He's studying engineering. She's in psychology, which surprised no one who knows her. She calls me every Sunday evening, real calls, not texts. We talk for an hour sometimes more. She tells me about her professors, about the friends she's making, about the way the leaves turn in October up there in a way that makes everything look like a painting. She sent me a photo once, just a photo of her dorm window with rain on the glass and a cup of tea on the sill. No caption, just the photo. I knew exactly what she meant. Daniel came to see me 6 months after Lily showed up on my porch. He came alone, in the evening, and he sat at my kitchen table, in the same chair Lily had sat in, and he looked like a man who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and was finally setting it down. He said, "Mom, I need to say I'm sorry." I let him say it. I didn't interrupt. I didn't say it was fine, or that it wasn't necessary, or any of the things we say to ease someone else's discomfort at the expense of the truth. He said he had known, for longer than he admitted, that things had gone wrong, that Vanessa's rules had become walls, that the version of me she had built in her mind bore no relation to who I actually was. He said he had told himself he was keeping the peace, protecting Lily from conflict, and that he had eventually understood that what he was actually doing was protecting himself from a hard conversation he didn't have the courage to have. He said, "I chose wrong. When I had to choose between the truth and the easy thing, I chose the easy thing. And I know what that cost you." I said, "What it cost me is over. What matters now is what happens next." He asked what that meant. I told him. I said, "I want to be your mother again. Not the version Vanessa decided I was. Me, your actual mother, who loves you and has made mistakes and is still here. If you want that, I want that." He said yes. Things with Vanessa are different now. Not healed, I want to be honest about that. She and I are not friends. We are not close. She is Lily's mother and Daniel's wife, and I treat her with the respect those roles deserve. I have not confronted her about the 3 years. I have not demanded an apology. I don't expect one. I made peace with the possibility that I might never get one, and that is its own kind of freedom. What I know now, what I didn't fully understand at the time, is that Vanessa's inability to share the people she loves is not about me. It never was. It was about a woman who learned very early that closeness was dangerous, that people who got too near eventually hurt you, and that the safest thing was to control the distance. Her own mother had watched it happen and grieved it, quietly, in a journal that ended up in an attic box that a grieving 17-year-old found one afternoon. I feel something for Vanessa that I did not expect to feel. Not quite compassion, I'm not there yet, but something adjacent to it, an understanding, a recognition that she was fighting a battle that had started long before I came along and that I just happened to be standing in the field. That doesn't make what she did right. It doesn't erase 3 years and 2 months and 11 days, but it helps me carry it. Lily is 20 now. She spent Christmas with me last year, her and Marcus both, and we made the lemon cake together from scratch, the 3 of us in my kitchen, flour everywhere, laughing at something Marcus had done to the frosting. Daniel came over for dinner that evening. We sat around my table and ate and talked and told stories. And at some point I looked around that room and felt, fully and without reservation, that I had been right to wait. Not because waiting fixed everything. It didn't. There are still hard days. There are still gaps in the story that won't be filled in. There is still a grandmother-shaped hole in 3 years of Lily's childhood that I can never get back. But she is here now. She is mine now. Not because I fought for her, but because I was still standing when she was ready to find her way back. And she found me. That is what I want you to take from this, if you take anything. There are battles that cannot be won by fighting. There are people you love who are held at a distance by someone else's fear, and every time you push against that fear, you give it more power over you. The hardest thing I have ever done was walk away from the door of my granddaughter's life and trust that she would open it herself someday. I could have been wrong. She might never have come. I had to make peace with that possibility too. But she came. She came in the rain, at 18, with a letter taped shut and eyes red from crying or the cold or both. And she said, "Grandma Ruth." And I let her in. That's all I did. I kept the door open, and I kept the light on, and I let her in. Sometimes love isn't about proximity. It isn't about winning or being right or being acknowledged. It's about being the kind of person your grandchild thinks of when the world feels too small and she needs to know that somewhere there is someone who will not ask her to choose, who will not make her prove anything, who will simply make tea and put a cake on the table and say, "There's nothing to be sorry for." We have time. I am 71 years old. I have made more mistakes than I can count. I have loved imperfectly and lost things I can't get back and sat alone in quiet houses, counting the days of a silence I didn't deserve. And I am here to tell you, the long game is worth playing. Hold on. Keep the light on. Let them come home when they're ready. They might just surprise you.